Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 96 of Cameron's Nostalgia Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Strickland. Today I have with me Charlie Canfield. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good.
You said 96 podcasts. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Wow. I looked at your YouTube channel and there's a lot of uploads. You've been
Nice.
busy.
Now for any of you guys who don't know, Charlie's a animator or visual effects guy. He is best known for working on Happy Tree Friends and some of the TV shows and films.
I worked on a few Happy Tree Friends as a storyboard artist, and then they weren't paying enough. So I went on to some other things. And they were animating in Flash in those days, and I've learned a bunch of animation software and used it thoroughly, but I could never wrap my head around Flash for some reason. So I couldn't help them animate. I could only storyboard for them.
All right. Let's begin our first question.
Okay.
How did you get interested in animation?
I, like most people, watched it as a kid, and in my day, uh, there was some not so good stuff on Saturday morning. Hanna-Barbera never really impressed me, even as a child. I just thought it looked cheap and it was boring. But the Warner Brothers stuff that was actually done way before my time, it was played on various TV stations. And it did have a slot on Saturday morning too. They cut together a whole bunch of the cartoons. But you know that clown in The Simpsons that has a TV show, Krusty?
Yes.
Well, it was based apparently because Matt Groening is from Seattle. It was based on a clown we had who was a wonderful man. He wasn't crusty at all. He was just a super nice guy, really involved in the city's goings on. His name was J.P. Patches, and he had a long running show that children and adults loved. Both the adults loved it too because he was doing improv all through the show with his friends, and it just cracked everybody up. And they had a wonderful sound effects library, and all the crew were constantly laughing. He had a really cool little set, TV set. It was supposed to be taking place in the city dump, so it was all very junky and ratty. And he would play cartoons all through his show. And he played a lot of really strange ones that were um, not well known because apparently, if I got this right, various companies would sell their cartoon packages and their scary movie packages to local TV stations in that era, in the 60s. And so he played a lot of Warner Brothers stuff and he played a lot of weird stuff too. And the producer of that show was the vampire host of the scary movies late at night on the weekends. So it was a really fun, improvisational, low budget production. And it was a really wonderful way to grow up watching those guys have fun on TV and learning about old media that otherwise you wouldn't have learned about, the old movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and then also the movies, I mean, the cartoons from that same era and later. And then just to follow up with your original question, um, a friend of mine showed me some stop motion he had done by animating oranges going across a table and animating a toy. And that suddenly made me realize what animation was. And when I got a tiny bit older, I think I was maybe 14 or 13, maybe. I used to love a particular newspaper cartoonist. I loved how he drew. He was a local guy in Seattle. And my mom, bless her heart, set up an appointment for me with this guy. And we made the big trip to Seattle, to the newspaper. It was all very exciting. Back into the back offices of a bustling newspaper. And I got to meet the guy, and he was very complimentary of my stupid drawings. And he said, "You know what? You might like these art books to help you draw poses and to draw strong silhouettes." And he recommended the Preston Blair books to me that were made in the 40s, I think, but they were getting reprinted. And I think you can still get reprints today. And suddenly it just clicked because there's all these drawings about how to animate and scenes from cartoons that Preston Blair had worked on in the kind of like, I guess he was primarily in the 40s and the 50s. And it blew me away. And I used my dad's 8 millimeter camera and I started drawing on paper that I punched myself so I could register it. And I had a piece of glass with some 2x4s underneath it and a light bulb. And I animated stuff. And I remember how frustrating it was. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. What this? But I studied what they showed me in those books. And I just said, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to work. And I shot it on 8 millimeter film, and you have to wait a week or two to get it back from the lab in those days. And then I screened it, and it blew me away. It worked. It was actually good. And it was magical to watch a drawing that I had done come to life. And I got to say, I've worked in film ever since. I never have had another job except when I was in high school. And every time I look at the film that I shot, I'm amazed that it actually works. It still surprises me. It works. So I've been doing it all my life, and now I'm teaching it.
Nice. So, what was your first animation gig?
Well, when I got the one I got, first one I got paid for, I did one or two films like that in high school, which I didn't get paid for. And then in art school, it was a graphic design program, but I kind of forced one of the assignments into being animation, and it was really well received. And I was able to show those things well, actually, before I had those done, and then a high school friend of mine, I think I must have been just out of high school. Well, actually, I probably showed him the stuff that I had done in college, which is, I graduated in about 19, when I was 21. And he needed some help with animation. He wanted to do clay animation for a little documentary he made. So I did that and I got paid for it on 16 millimeter film. And then I took those pieces and I met I've never actually filled out a resume in my life, except for those high school jobs. It's always been word of mouth. It's so important to have community and to build a community and keep in touch with those people, and they become your friends and extended family. And I'm still friends with those people that I met 40 whatever years ago. But when I was just after that gig with the claymation, um, I bought a ticket to the Seattle International Film Festival, and film festivals weren't so common back then. And I just started eavesdropping on people who were talking in the lobby at one of the meetups, and I overheard animation. So I politely inserted myself into their conversation, and they were very nice to me. And we talked about animation, and I asked them if they would like to see some of my work, and they said, of course. And I took it to one of them had a studio locally in Seattle in a little house on Capitol Hill. And it was such a charming little place. And I showed everybody the film, and they hired me to paint cells to apply to transfer the animation drawings onto plastic sheets like in the old days, and paint the cells on the back, and then uh, they would shoot it up in their attic on a big camera, 35 millimeter camera they had set up. Then they would send the film to the local film lab in Seattle. And I got to know those people in the film lab. And they hired me because a whole bunch of the people had moved down to ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, in San Rafael, California. And so I got to learn a lot at this film lab, and they had a little special effects lab there, department. And we shot film titles and optical effects, and I was able to do a lot more animation than they had done before, because that was my interest. And so I stayed there, and I stayed really, they didn't pay me much, but I learned a lot, and I stayed really late, and I did a lot of camera tests to learn how to do stuff, learn the results. And at some point we got this really nice motion control system that ILM had also. And I did all these film tests on reversal film so I could process it in black and white. It was black and white film, and I could do all these motion control tests, and then I could process it myself in the dark room in a tray, just really sloppily. And then I would see the results, and I would make notes, and I kept them in a notebook, and I kept notes on all the how to use that special software for the motion control of the camera. And then I got hired at ILM. So I came down to California, and I worked there for a couple of years in their motion control camera department. And then I decided I didn't want to learn more about computers. It was really being taken over by computer graphics at that point, and I didn't really want to go that route. And I went upstairs to where they had a wonderful hand-drawn animation department that did special effects like lightning and fire and shadows that they needed to use in live action movies to make things look real. So I did that for a year or so. And computer graphics just started to do more of that as well. So took I took some time, and I made some walk cycles, and I put a little portfolio together of drawings. And I went to a place that I'd learned about when I was back in Seattle. It was also in San Francisco. It was called Colossal Pictures, and they were really amazing bunch of people, and they did really interesting looking, cutting edge styles of animation. And I showed them some stuff, and they hired me. And I took a kind of a cut in what I could do there. They didn't want me as an animator so much as they wanted me as an in-betweener, which is a lower level job. But hey, man, I was happy to go do that, get my foot in the door. And I did that for a while. And every time somebody had left out some animation, I'd go and ask the animator. I said, "Hey, I noticed you didn't do this hair here. Can I do it?" And they'd go, "Yeah, go ahead." And so I did it, and I'd say, "Is this all right?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, that's good." And I gradually got more and more animation to do, and I became an animation director there. Stayed there for about, I don't know, what was it, about 6 years or 9 years, I guess. And then they went out of business finally, and I got hired at an offshoot of them. Somebody else who had a bunch of other people that had worked there started another company called Wild Brain, and I got hired there to work. And then they got kind of, what always happens with companies like that is the management keeps hiring managers and firing the artists, and they outsource the work until there's no artists left and just managers. So I left there, and I started doing independent animation for documentaries. Somebody, word of mouth again, told me to check out this guy's work, see if he needed an animator to do something on a little documentary he was doing. And I worked with him on 4 different films, and that led to a 5th film. And that led to more work. And at some point, somebody needed a teacher at a university here in town, and I started working there as a teacher. And uh, animation is really, really hard work, and it's always stressful in some way or another to me. And so it's always kind of a mind game to relax and produce the work and be vigilant and supportive of your team and be vigilant about your own work, assessing it and making sure it's what those people need. And so I was glad to not have to um, chase that kind of work anymore. And it's a different kind of stress to be a teacher, but it's very rewarding. And I like the vibrant crowd of people that keep passing through the schools. Oh yeah, and that led to another school. So I taught teaching in 2 schools now. So yeah, just lots of community and word of mouth, and just an interest in animation and drawing has brought me to this point, for better or worse. How's that for a long answer to your one question?
It was good.
All right.
So you worked on Back to the Future Part 2.
Part 2 and 3, yeah, that was at ILM. That was nice because it had some motion control work and it had some animated work. For the motion control work, I remember, there were a lot of one actor would play multiple roles in that movie. So we needed to combine 2 different pieces of film. Like you could say, the actor's playing by one character when they shoot this scene or when they shoot this shot. Then they do the shot again and they have the character as another in another role over here, and they somehow need to join them up. And oftentimes the camera's moving. So we would watch their films that they shot, and we would find places to black out part of the frame along. We'd hide it along corners of rooms and behind furniture, along the edges of things. And so we were able to combine 2 pieces of film by using a mat. Are you familiar with screen printing?
Yes.
So there's a screen and it's got areas where the paint can pass through, but other parts are blocked off and the paint can't get through there. So when you put it on a t-shirt and you smear some paint in there, it's only where you want it, and the paint didn't get through those other areas. Same thing with working with mats in film, is you run the film through once with part of it covered up, and you're exposing the film to the footage. You're reprinting the footage that you want over here. Then you wind the camera back and you do it again, but this time you show the other piece of film you want, you reprint the other piece of film you need, and you block the other part with the matte. And that way you're combining two different shots onto a new print. And that's how they would do all the special effects for years and years and years. That's how it's worked. And it's it's been variously sophisticated. Sometimes it doesn't work so well, uh, but it's usually a pretty convincing effect. And so that was part of the jobs for Back to the Future. And the other one was I remember in Back to the Future 2, Biff. Well, there's these flying skateboards, and they shot these characters flying around on cables, and they had little jets of fire coming out of the back of their skateboards, as if that was powering the skateboard like a jet engine, you know. And they shot the actors on these boards, and they had little exhaust, just fake little exhaust tubes. And then somebody on stage shot a butane, or I think it was a flare. What do you call them? It's like a welding torch kind of a thing with a real fire that comes out. And they just shot a whole bunch of different angles. And then I took that and I put it over the exhaust tubes in the earlier shot. I matched exactly where they needed to go. It's called match moving, where you track something that's moving in a shot and you put something additional there. So the end result is that flame that I've reshot in different positions matches where the little exhaust tubes are in the original shot. They reprint that, and you wind up with the combination of skateboard with little exhaust tubes and fire coming out, and it moves around. So that was some of the motion control work, just simple stuff. It's nothing sophisticated, but it was new to me. And then I also animated some shadows for that film and some lightning, I think, upstairs in the hand-drawn special effects department. So that was my combination of different kinds of animation in that particular movie, or those two movies. Does that make
Nice.
sense?
It makes sense.
Good.
And what about the Hunt for Red October?
That was very similar. It was a limited kind of work that I did on that one. It's hard to even notice probably, but they shot these giant, like 6-foot models of submarines, and they shot them on a soundstage, and they'd fog up the soundstage to look like murky water. And the actually interesting thing to note, they hung them from wires, and in order to hide the wires, they shot everything upside down, so the subs are actually being hung from the bottom, and they turn the camera upside down. And then when you see the footage right side up, you as an audience member, you're tempted to look for the cables. Like, how did they get that sub to do that? And you're looking for wires on the top, but they're on the bottom. So you're not so likely to see them. But they have these fins sticking out of the submarines, and they needed little, what they called contrails, just little white streaks. So it looked like it was moving through the water, making little bubbles. And that was a different kind of match moving, where we would, this is a little more complicated, but we would plot over the course of several frames the exact point on the fin that we wanted to start the streak of bubbles. So we would plot this little path, say, for example, but it might happen over 20 frames. And the whole shot might be, 60 frames. But we would just plot every point, and then we would open up, we would have a little pinpoint of light on our camera stand, and we would move the camera stand along those 20 points and fade out the light. So you wound up with a streak on every frame of film that gradually fades out. And then we'd advance to the next frame, and we'd, for instance, let's just say we have frames 1 through 20 painted onto frame 1. Then we'd go to frame 2 and we'd paint 2 to 21. Then we'd move to the next frame and we'd paint 3 to 22. So it was we could paint the streaks along, and the sub would move around and these streaks would come off as it was animated. That again is a kind of match moving combined with something that's routinely called a streak. Have you seen 2001, A Space Odyssey?
Yes.
You know that scene where the astronaut is rushing through those colored streaks? You remember that scene? It goes on a long time. And all those, it looks infinite almost. It looks like the stuff is just passing overhead. You know which scene I'm talking about?
Yes.
Well, that's a streak. And it was it was one of the first times that was used, as far as I know. And they did the same thing. And something that's interesting to look for is you'll notice these horizontal striations if you look at that scene in the film. And that's caused by the stepper motor that's moving the artwork on the camera stand. That it doesn't quite move evenly. It kind of chugs. And so it exposes the film a little bit more during each rotation or probably each gearing. So it's making these little darker and lighter streaks horizontally.
Nice. And you worked on the 1990 film Dreams.
Yeah, that I didn't have much to do with that, but I like the fact that what I shot is on the cover of in the poster. But it was all set up for me. I just shot the film. Um, there was footage of a little boy walking in a garden, kind of a small garden. They planted a lot of flowers, but it was just a really limited part of the frame, like where my hands are. Maybe it was out here. And then a painter painted a mountain landscape and a rainbow on a new painting. They painted several paintings. One of them was the mountain range and grass and more flowers, so they seemed to go on forever. And then they painted a rainbow on another against black on another painting. And then they gave me some film that had rain in it. And they gave me another glass painting with clouds on them, if I remember correctly. So they gave me several different elements. The boy in the garden, the boy in this patch of flowers, a background of more flowers and a mountain, a rainbow, and some clouds. I think that might have been it. And so I took my brand new piece of film and I put up a white board so I could expose the film just where I wanted it to light. And I sandwiched the footage of the boy in the patch of flowers to the brand new film, and the light passes through and reprints the boy in the flowers onto this new piece of film. Then I cover that up, that part where the boy was, with black. It's on the painting already. It's got a black patch there, a black shape, just like the same shape as the boy in the flowers. And I shot the mountain on the same piece of film. Then I wound back the camera again and I shot the rainbow and it's superimposed. I think I might have revealed it or faded it up or something. And that gets printed onto the film. Then I wound the camera back and I sandwiched it with the rain element they gave me. And I put up the whiteboard again. And then that allows light to hit just where the rain was on the film. And so by the time I get done, I've passed this piece of film through the camera 4 or 5 times, I think. And first it was the boy and nothing else. Then it was the mountain and nothing else. Then it was the rainbow and nothing else. Then it was the clouds moving across, and that was nothing else. It was on a motor driven um, rack, I think, to do those clouds. Was that everything? And then the rain. I don't know if I said that. But when you get done, what you see in the film is a boy walking through an infinite, huge field of flowers, some of them real, some of them painted. And he's looking at this landscape, which is also painted. And the rainbow comes out, which is also painted. And the rain is sparkling. And that was from another, somebody set up a sprinkler and shot a bunch of rain. So that's a really common series of things to do to make a matte painting look alive. You're combining a painting with live action, and then you put some stuff moving in the painting so that it looks alive. That also is a 100-year-old process that's been used in many, many, many films.
Nice. So, what was it like working on another 1990 film, Ghost?
That was also very interesting. Each film has its own needs because they always want to make it look novel and show you something new. And so they have to come up with new terminology. And it's funny, I still remember some of the terms because they needed to describe these effects that were a little bit new. And there was one effect where the ghost characters will put their hand through a wall, and you'll see a dark color move up their arm, for instance, and they called that a blur bleed. And then the ghost also moves when they move their hands fast. They streak, and that was another use of that streak process, where we have to match move what the hand is doing, and then we create some artwork that is smearable over on each frame of film. I forget what that was called. Remember the blur bleed, ghost blur? I think that was probably what the streak was called. But yeah, there were a lot of really cool effects, and back in those days, all those props were actual physical models. So they had a nice model train on the stage, I believe. That train is fake. It's just a miniature. I forget how big they made it. And it's really interesting when you work there at a place like that because you have to watch everybody's film from the previous day and evaluate what needs to be fixed and what to do next. And those are called dailies because usually you see them every day or you see them the next day. Um, and I think on that job, I was mostly doing ghost blurs, if I remember right. So that was that film.
And what about doors?
That was another one where people just gave me the elements I needed, and then I match moved Jim Morrison's head as he's tripping on LSD, and I took a film element that was of like a I think it was a sun flare or some sort of twinkly flare, and I just put it on his face, and I made sure it was always on his face as he moved around. I can't remember if there was a streak involved or not. But it's kind of a halo, I think, and it animates a little bit because it was a real flare they shot, a real light flare. Are you familiar with what an optical printer is?
I have him right here in my living room.
Really? Oh, you mean you have a picture of it, or you have a version of one?
I have a printer.
But do you have an optical printer? Are you Googling an image of it or a Wikipedia page?
I don't have the optical printer.
Right. That's an expensive, big piece of machinery. But it's also very old, very traditional piece of equipment, very fancy. And what you do is everything I've described to you that I've done has had to go through an optical printer at some point. Although I got to say, I guess maybe the Kurosawa Dreams matte painting, I was the optical printer in that I was putting these film pieces together. But normally you shoot these film pieces and then you use an optical printer, you load up the film. Let's say we're doing the Back to the Future where we want to combine um, two characters, or you want to combine one character who's played two roles. You're trying to combine them into one scene. You would take the first performance and you put it on a couple of reels, and it gets projected through a lens. And then you'd put up the matte that I shot, which blocks off the screen where you don't want him. You want to save that part, so you don't want any light to hit it. And the light passes through that matte film, the film with the matte on it, and it hits a brand new piece of film. So you're optically printing these things onto another piece of film. Then you wind the new piece back. You take off that first performance and the matte, and you put up your opposite matte, and you put up your other performance, and you run that through, and it gets printed onto that new piece of film. That's what an optical printer is for. And I can't remember why we started talking about that. Maybe you can remind me what your original question was. You were talking about, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know.
Let's see if I can remember. We talked about Doors last, right? Was that the last film you asked me about, Doors? That's another case where I was sort of the optical printer because I took the footage of Jim Morrison and figured out where I needed that lens flare. Oh no, I just shot an element for that, and then it went to optical printing. Then they had this interesting. I remember why I was going to go where I started to describe it. Optical printers, really big piece of machinery with lenses and everything. But ILM figured out a way to have a really tightly registered. I forget what they called it, but you kind of had a mini optical printer where you could set it on the animation stand on the table, and you'd line up your camera where you wanted it, and the precision was so tight with this little mini optical, I mean mini pin registered. Dang, what did they call that? But it advances the film one frame at a time by itself, and it's very tightly registered, so it's not going to wiggle once it gets printed. So I'm able to shoot this flare moving around exactly where Jim's head is. Then I give that light flare to the optical printer, and he prints it onto new piece of film, and then he prints Jim Morrison's head onto that new piece of film, and you wind up with Jim Morrison with his halo moving around with twinkling.
All right. And you worked on a TV show called Wigwig Television.
Yeah, that was drawn animation, and there were lots of different segments on that show. And the one I worked on was this silly stick figure theater where these dumb looking stick figures would reenact movie scenes or newsreel audio tracks. And we tried to make it really dumb looking, like really badly animated, but it was really hard not to try to be a good animator, you know? It was really a funny challenge. It's like, it doesn't look stupid enough. So, yeah, I always wanted to try to make that animation look stupider than I was able to achieve.
And you worked on The Rocketeer.
Yeah, Rocketeer was very similar where, well, actually, that was all hand-drawn stuff. We needed to do fire coming out of the Rocketeer's jets. Oh no, I did do some motion control on that. There's a scene where the villain is in the Zeppelin with the Rocketeer character, and the villain is holding the female character, and the Rocketeer fires a flare gun. And when they shot it, they didn't actually fire a flare gun, but they flashed light around and they set off little explosions, poof, poof, poof. And then I took that film and I shot a twinkly flare that left the gun at the right time to synchronize with the first flash. And then I made sure it hit the wall to do the next to explode the little bit of explosive stuff they embedded in the set. And then another one was over here, so I shot the little flare going over there at the right and synchronized it with that little explosion. So it looks like he shoots off this ball of light that goes flying around the room and causes all these little explosions. And then that element goes to optical printing again, and it gets sandwiched with that original shot of the actors doing their, pretending to shoot the flare gun.
Nice.
You know what? I should say, I had a kind of sad but interesting experience with my granddad regarding that film. Uh, I years before that, I showed him Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I'm sure you've seen, and it shows actors doing all sorts of crazy, adventurous, dangerous looking stuff, but it's all pretend and it's all movie magic, right? And my granddad just thought it was the funniest show. He just loved that film because it kind of reminded him of old movies. And then I brought him to see Rocketeer, and he had started to go a little downhill. He had started to get a little demented, and he was upset that the actors were in such danger because they're shooting flare guns in a Zeppelin and they're flying around with rocket packs. So in those few years, he had started to lose some of his mental acuity, and he was actually frightened for the actors. He couldn't wrap his head around movie magic anymore. He didn't know it was pretend.
Nice. And what about Elroy goes berserk?
That was just one of those CD-ROM games that came and went. Uh, a technology that lasted for a few years and never to be seen again, probably. Um, but again, that was another word of mouth thing where a friend said, "Oh, my friend's up in Seattle. They need somebody to art direct, animation direct, and storyboard this stuff." And I had run out of work for a little while here in San Francisco, so I moved up to Seattle for 6 months and I worked on that game.
And what about the adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle?
That was one of those wild brain jobs, and I'll say it out loud for everybody to hear. Um, it's a tiresome movie, and they had the audacity to try to redesign Rocky and Bullwinkle, which is a crime against culture because it was such a gorgeously, sloppily designed series of cartoons. Uh, but I had to take those redesigned characters and I animated the titles, or I storyboarded out all the ideas for the animated titles, and then I and some other animators animated the cartoon characters doing different things with the titles. And that had been a feature in the original show, where the titles are falling over and stuff. And so we were trying to emulate that and think up lots of gags involving that kind of stuff. How's that for a run through? Are you reading IMDb or something?
Yes.
Okay.
And another project that you worked on was Happy Tree Friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the one I just storyboarded. And you can see those boards actually on my website.
Do you have a favorite episode of Happy Tree Friends?
No, I have to admit I didn't watch it that much. I just saw pieces of it and I'd see certain bits and pieces of it over the years. Uh and then when I worked on it, I just had to make sure I understood the look and the tone of it. So I watched enough of it to understand that. And they really liked the boards apparently. But it took me a long time. I wanted them to be really as good as I could make them, and it just took too much time for what they were paying. So I did it twice, and then I moved on to some other things.
So you have behind the scenes footage or photos of Happy Tree Friends.
Uh, I don't think I do. I have storyboards for it. I mean, that's essentially behind the scenes, I guess, uh, but not in the sense that you often hear it. But yeah, you can find them on the website.
And what about around June?
Um, that's some of my favorite animation I've ever done. Um, and again, another friend of mine who I used to work with knew of a guy making an independent film, uh, and he needed some animation for different sequences. So I think I did 5 or 6 sequences for him, and they all look quite different. Uh, one of them is one of them I've never been happy with, but the others I liked a lot. And they presented a certain challenge to me because animation's really hard to do and it takes a long time. And in that particular movie, they needed a lot of animation. They needed it to last a long time because people are talking, they're telling a story and it takes a long time for them to tell the story, and there's supposed to be animation over the whole piece section. And so I figured out ways to do really, really minimal animation and just have certain things stay alive. It was still a lot of work. And I'm usually for this independent stuff, I don't get paid very much, but I work really hard on it because I want it to look good. I want to be happy with it. And I still take lots of shortcuts where I can, but it takes a lot of work even to make a shortcut work. You have to constantly try to refine it so that it it accomplishes what you want.
You worked on a TV movie called A Spanning Time.
Oh, that's one of those documentaries, actually. It did air on TV, however. Um, yeah, for that one guy who I did 4 films with, it led to a 5th film. That was one of them. And it was about this particular client was you never know who your client, it's one thing when you're an animator and you think, I want to work for Pixar, or I want to work with Disney. But what you really, where the work is people that you've never heard of. And you have no idea they need animation. You need to look where everyone else hasn't. And this guy was doing a documentary filmmaker for the California Highway Union, I think, or the engineers that have this union up and down California. And they did 5 movies that I was able to work on. So, and each one was really well received. Uh, so I just feel really lucky that I'm able to be in contact with people like that I wouldn't know about otherwise. But you hear a little bit here, you get a recommendation, and then get a tip, and you're able to meet up with these people that need animation on an interesting project. Or 5.
You worked on The Next Frontier,
Same
engineering
client. Yep, same client, same kind of work.
the golden age of green.
Hmm. Yeah, there were 5 films, and that's one of them.
All right. And you worked on Ann Richards's Texas.
Oh yeah, that was a different documentary. I don't remember how I got. That was another word of mouth thing, and they needed a title sequence about that person, and they had a Dolly Parton song they wanted to do it too, so they licensed that song, and it's about a female politician who was really well loved in Texas. And so I was able to do kind of a music video. It was all sunk up to music, which was fun.
And finally, Audrey and Daisy.
Hmm. Audrey and Daisy. I'm having a hard time remembering what that is. It's funny. Audrey and Daisy. Oh, yeah, I wasn't very involved with that. That was one of my other animator colleagues. Um, they primarily did that, and I just helped out on a couple of scenes, I think.
It was streaming on Netflix.
Yeah, you know what? I never saw it actually.
You know, Happy Tree Friends was a bloody and gory show.
Yeah, it celebrated that. That was its thing. It wanted to shock you in a fun way. Did you watch many of those?
Yes, it's awfully gross looking.
Yeah, we tried hard. Thank you.
And all the deaths are being killed by Flippy.
Yeah, and then they come back resurrected in the next cartoon.
All right. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, glad to talk with you. How did you get interested in animation?
I was watching uh cartoons when I was little.
Which ones did you like the most?
I like Angelina Ballerina.
Hmm.
And there's Bob the Builder
Yeah,
and Todd World.
gotta remember that one. And then did you ever do animation on your own?
Yes.
All right, good for you. How did you do it? You said you did some stop motion?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And did you do any drawn animation?
A little bit.
Hmm. It's easier now with iPads and various software packages, iPhones even.
I got mine.
Hmm. You see this background here that I've got?
Yes.
Do you know what it is? Um, when I do storyboards in Photoshop, I work really, really hard, and there's layers upon layers upon layers, many, many, many layers by the time I get done, all in one document. And every now and then, I turn them all on and I take a picture. So this is, I don't know how many, maybe 40, 50, 70 layers of storyboards all stacked up on each other. And I just take a screenshot of them when I do that. So
Nice.
that's how much work goes into storyboarding. It's the hardest job in filmmaking, many will say, because you have to think like a director, a cinematographer, an editor, an actor, an audience, and you got to be a storyboarder.
Nice.
Takes a lot of work, a lot of planning.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Do you want a recommendation for a storyboarding movie?
Yes.
I'm going to put it in chat. How's that? But I will need to look it up online to get a link. I'm gonna have to move this tab over here so I can see what I'm doing. Oh, it's Harold Lilly. Okay, I'm gonna drop this link. Oops, it didn't happen. Oop, there. Uh, I'll just put in the whole Google results, and then you can click on various links if you're interested.
All right.
And I'll type it in here. It's Harold and Lillian, a Hollywood love story. But this is a really good film to tell you just how hard it is to find work and keep work, and how important it is to be supportive of the projects and the people that you're working with.
Nice.
All right. Well, Cameron, really great to talk with you all this time. Thank you for
You're
reaching out.
welcome. Stay tuned for more guests coming up. Until next,
Okay.
peace.
Peace out.